Marcia Kovulich, working on Retreat Migraine to MC this incredible virtual event. We appreciate all of you coming here. I'm for Menti.com. You type Menti.com in your phone or your computer, and then there is usually a 6-digit code that you can enter. So you'll go to Menti.com, and then there should be 6 digits on the screen for you to enter. It's 506364. And the first question is, which 3 emotions have you experienced in the last week? So as you're filling that out, it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for this session, Kerrie Smyres. Kerrie Smyres is a writer and patient advocate who has had chronic migraine for more than 30 years. Writing about the emotional experience of living with migraine is her passion. She credits self-care for major improvements in her own life with migraine, so she's excited to talk about this topic with you all today. You can find Kerrie's writing on The Daily Headache and migraine.com.
Hello, everyone. So thank you for responding to the Menti poll. We'll wait for the results to come up. As we're waiting for those to come up, I want to welcome you to this session on self-care. And, oh good, our word cloud is coming up. So I asked you all to share this because I wanted to see what emotions you were experiencing this week. And as I look at this list, exhaustion, sadness, frustration, anger, there's some gratitude, some joy, some hope, also sadness. I feel like I've experienced all of these emotions each day of this week, and I assume that that's probably true for everybody. Life is really hard right now, and we are exhausted. And that means that self-care is more important than ever, but that also means that it's harder than ever. And so today I am going to talk about self-care and specifically, hold on, I need to share my screen and get my slides up. I am specifically going to talk about quick and simple self-care. So self-care is often treated as something that's going to be time-consuming. It's me time that takes you away from your other responsibilities. Sometimes it's seen as expensive or elaborate. That's not how I see self-care at all. I mean, it can be if that's what works for you, but I found that the most effective self-care are the things that take a few seconds or a few minutes and that you can integrate into your day. So that's going to be my focus today. You may be wondering who I am beyond that brief introduction from Marcia, sort of a general overview. And I want to talk specifically about why I'm talking to you about self-care. When I first started seeking migraine treatment, I put all of my hope into every treatment. Each treatment I tried was going to be the thing that gave me my life back. And whatever it was, a medication, a procedure, a surgery, each time it failed, I was heartbroken. And so I was on this roller coaster of thinking, all right, I'm on the cusp of getting my life back, and then I wouldn't. And in December 2003, I had an occipital nerve stimulator implanted. At the time, I thought this was my last hope. I thought this was the only thing that was available to me. Out of everything I'd tried, nothing had worked, so this was it, and this was the only way I was going to get my life back. In retrospect, I realized I had only tried a very small number of treatments at that point, but at the time, I believed this was my last hope. And so when it didn't work, I was completely devastated. And as I'm trying to come out of that devastation, I had two realizations. The first was that I needed to find a way to have hope that didn't hinge on whether treatment was successful or not. I needed to try to figure out how to have hope in a way that was more internal. It wasn't just based on something external that I couldn't really control. And then the second realization was that I still had my life. I'd been trying all these treatments to get my life back, but I still had a life. It wasn't the life that I'd had before. It wasn't a life that looked anything like I wanted. Certainly not a life that I had chosen, but it was a life and it was mine. And so maybe there was something that I could do to try to figure out how to live as well as possible while still pursuing migraine treatment, certainly still trying to find something that would make me feel better, but how to live a life that I could enjoy while I was doing that. And self-care is a major way that I did that. I don't want it to sound like I had this revelation and I jumped in and I was all about self-care and everything was great. It was a slow process to figure out what worked for me. There are times where I find something that works and it works for a few years and then it doesn't really work for me anymore. Or I'm super dedicated to self-care and then other times I let it fall by the wayside. This has been a 16-year process. And so certainly lots of ups and downs. But what I found is it's that small self-care that is the most valuable for me. It becomes almost integrated into my daily life. It, in fact, does become integrated into my daily life. So I don't really even notice that I'm doing it. This is with practice, of course, but it's those small things that really boost my spirit and just sort of give me a reserve, a feeling like I can handle life. So I'm going to briefly talk about what self-care is, and then the bulk of this presentation is broken down into two sections. One is a self-care brainstorm that I did, and then the next is going to be talking with other people who have migraine about what they're doing for self-care, because I'm certainly not the be-all, end-all of self-care, and we can all learn from each other. And I would really love this to be interactive so all of you could share as well, but the technology doesn't really allow for that. So this is sort of a bridge to that, and so we can at least hear and learn from some other people. So what is self-care? Self-care is attending to your physical, emotional, and mental health. It's a simple, short definition for a really tall order. These are hard things to do. So this is why the second part of the definition is so important to me, in even the smallest ways. As I've said before, to me, the small self-care is, I don't want to say the most valuable because I don't want to rank it, but personally for me, I think it makes the biggest difference in my ability to function. And it's these things that take a few seconds or a few minutes and just become normal that give me the most support. And so those are the kinds of things I'm going to talk to you about today. So I mentioned I did a self-care brainstorm. I sat down and I wrote down all the things that I do for self-care, and I talked to friends and family about the things that they did. And I came up with this long list, and I saw that it broke into three sort of overarching categories. So that's how I'm going to break it down for you. But before I get into that, I want to talk about some, I don't know, basic like foundational things about self-care, some things to think about before you start a new self-care practice or change your existing one, just some good things to have in mind. The first is give yourself permission. I feel like we're often our own worst enemies when it comes to self-care. We think that we don't have the time for it, or we don't have the energy, or that it's going to take us away from other people. And so we don't allow ourselves to do it. But if you give yourself permission, then you are actually giving yourself permission to do the things that you need to do to take care of yourself. So you're actually more available for your other responsibilities and the other people, and more open to the joy and the happiness in life. Make it your own. So the ideas that I'm going to give you are things that I came up with, and like I said, my friends and family came up with, but self-care is really personal. So I see this brainstorm as a starting point. Maybe you'll try some of the things on it. Maybe you'll think, yeah, that doesn't really seem like it's going to work for me, but I could try this. And so it's really that idea of what could you try? What fits into your life and what sort of fits your personality and feels right to you? So I really suggest you try to make it your own. Start slowly. As I've said, this is like quick and simple self-care. It doesn't take very long. So you might look at it and think, I can do all of the things. They don't take that much time. They can all fit in, or I can do 5 of them. But any new practice that you adopt, any new thing that you try, takes a little bit of attention at first and a little bit of time to become normal and to feel comfortable. So I recommend choosing 1 or 2 things and trying them for a few days or a week and seeing what's comfortable for you and how they work for you. And then you can slowly add things in. Obviously, this is, again, another personal thing, and so you'll figure out your own pace. But if you're feeling overwhelmed by self-care, that probably means you're trying to do too much. So even if you only try to work on one thing, that can be really supportive and helpful for your own spirit. Yeah, we'll go with that word. And then the last thing I want to say before I get into the brainstorm is to keep trying. You try something on here and you think, wow, that does not work for me. So try something else, or try something else that you came up with. Or you might try something and think, yeah, that kind of works for me, but I'm not sure. So keep trying, because it could be that maybe you weren't in the most focused mindset that day, and so you need to try it again. It could be that it's just unfamiliar and that it's a little uncomfortable, and so you need to keep trying to make it feel a little bit more comfortable. But whatever it is, self-care is so personal, and the circumstances of your life are probably changing. I mean, everything feels really everything feels like it's unchanging right now, but at the same time, it feels like everything's so monumental that certainly my emotions are changing. And so even if the circumstances of your life aren't changing, the way you're feeling about life could be. And so how you approach self-care could be different every day, and how you feel about it could be different every day. And honestly, that applies normally too, not just in a global pandemic. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I hope you didn't hear me gulp. Okay. On to the brainstorm. This first sort of category of self-care that I saw that this brainstorm fell into was soothing. And soothing is pretty self-explanatory. It's things that you can find comfort in, things that are soothing, calming, things that ground you. So the first idea needs no explanation. Play with a pet. My next idea is to find a comforting spot. Obviously, right now, that needs to be in your home or your yard if you have one, but it doesn't need to be elaborate. It doesn't need to be beautifully decorated. It doesn't need to be fancy. It doesn't even need to be secluded. It could be a chair in your living room. For me, my comforting spot is on the floor between the bed and the wall. It's this really narrow space, and I find being in a confined space really soothing. Ever since I was in a depression about 15 years ago, I found myself craving a tight, confined space, and it's incredibly soothing for me. So that's where I go. Sometimes I treated it like a timeout. I take a box of Kleenex and I cry. Other times I take my phone and I do crosswords so I can just sort of zone out and not think about what's stressing me out. Sometimes I take my computer and work, and it's just easier to do when I'm in that comforting spot. So this comforting spot doesn't actually have to take you away from the rest of your life. You can still do other things while you're in it, and just the act of being in that space can be soothing. Listen to music. This is one that takes almost no time at all, just the amount of time it takes to cue up the music. It's something that I often forget about. And whenever I remember, oh, right, I love music and I can listen to it while I'm doing basically anything. And I'll turn on music and I just feel my shoulders relax. It is so calming to have music that I enjoy on. Again, this is really personal, so it's music that you enjoy. But it's a great way to have something soothing when you're going about your daily life. My next suggestion is to seek out beauty. This can be anything that you find beautiful. It can be nature or Broadway musicals or art or children laughing or prayer or whatever it is that you find beautiful. And these are all things that fortunately right now we don't actually have to leave our houses for. Having spent a lot of my adult life basically housebound with migraine, I'm really grateful for how much has come to us all of a sudden. Hamilton's available online. Famous museums have virtual tours. There's so much available to us that wasn't available. And so if you need some soothing and need some beauty, you can check in online. I say check in online, like just check Facebook. No, like make it a deliberate thing where you're choosing something that you find soothing. Connect with others. So this can be really hard when you have migraine. I have times where I'll go months and not talk to anybody except my husband because he's the person I live with. But what I discovered was that it was really nice to be able to send texts to friends and say, hey, I'm thinking about you. I'm not up for talking right now, but no, you're on my mind. And what that did was, for one thing, just made me feel a little bit better, a little less isolated. And it also sort of stoked those relationships so that when I was able to reconnect with a friend, they knew I hadn't ghosted them, I hadn't forgotten them, I wasn't blowing them off. They knew that I actually wanted to reconnect. And so when it was time, they were more available and it was easier to pick that relationship back up. And on another side of connecting with others, there's also reaching out to people, if you have the bandwidth, reaching out to people by that I mean the emotional bandwidth. Basically, you're in the mental space where you're able to reach out to people. If you know somebody is struggling, send them a text that says, "Hey, I'm thinking about you. No need to respond." I loved getting messages like this when I was at my sickest, because I wanted to know that my friends hadn't forgotten about me. But I also hated that sense of obligation of, oh, I'm letting somebody down by not responding. And so that just adding that no need to respond lifts that sense of obligation and lets people know that you care about them. And lots of people are having a really hard time right now. I've been sending messages like this a lot, and they're really well received. And obviously, you want to make the language your own. You don't need to say it exactly like I did, but that the key points are I'm not up for connecting, or I'm not up for talking right now, but you're on my mind, and also no need to reply. Use a soothing touch. So self-compassion researcher Kristen Neff talks about petting her own arm when she's trying to soothe herself. And when I first read this or heard it, I thought, no way, that is not going to work for me. But I decided to give it another try and see maybe it would work for me. And there are a lot of ways you can use soothing touch. It doesn't have to be petting your arm. Gently squeezing the fleshy area between your thumb and your pointer finger can be really soothing. Rubbing your arms, hugging yourself. I like to press on my sternum. I'm really close to the camera, so I'm not sure if you can see, so I'll back up. I don't know if that's far enough. I can't actually see a video of myself while I'm doing this. So sort of in your upper chest, that can be really soothing. Pressing here between your eyebrows can be really soothing. Some of these are more conspicuous than others. There are a lot of things that you can do, like if you're in an argument with somebody else, there's soothing touch that you can do that they won't notice. And then other times, if you're alone or you don't care who sees you, there are other things that you can do. And I think of this as any time that I feel like I could need a hug from somebody. Hugs are kind of hard to get right now. And obviously it's not the same as being able to hug somebody else, but there's a lot that you can do with soothing touch for yourself that's really grounding. And then my next point is to breathe. Obviously, we're all breathing all the time. This is a deliberate breathing practice, a really deep breath into your belly. So, consider it's called diaphragmatic breathing or belly breathing. And the idea is that your stomach rises when you take a deep breath. That's a lot more soothing than breathing into your chest. If you just take shallow breaths into your chest, you can actually hyperventilate. If you're not familiar with belly breathing, I'll include some resources at the end, a link where you can get to a video that shows you what belly breathing looks like. So this doesn't need to be an extended breathing practice. It doesn't need to be a meditation. It can literally be 3 deep belly breaths. Something that you can do, again, if you're upset, if you're in an argument, if you're sad, if you just need to calm down, breathing is an excellent way to do it. And it's something else you can set a timer to remind you throughout the day to belly breathe. And again, it can be just three deep breaths when the timer goes off. And you may not realize you're stressed, but whatever state you're in, you're a little bit calmer after you do some belly breathing. And there are lots of breathing exercises online. And so you can really go down a rabbit hole with this, whatever works for you. But really, just deep breathing into your belly makes a huge difference. So these are my soothing self-care tips. We're going to do another Menti poll that Caitlin will bring up for us. And the question on this one is, what soothes you? So if you can say in a few words, this will be another word cloud. So if you can share what soothes you, I'd love for us to be as interactive as possible. I want us to be able to learn from each other. This is awesome. Thank you all so much for sharing. I really love seeing what is working for you and seeing this list so we can learn from each other about what might work, like watching comedy, solitaire, a bubble bath. These are really great. And obviously this will come off the screen as I return to my slides, but we'll have an image of it that we can share in either on the chat page or in the Facebook, probably I'll say in the Facebook comments on this Facebook Live feed, so you can all see it for each other and learn from each other. So savoring is the next point, and I read this great definition of savoring is extending pleasure. So there's a lot of hard stuff in life right now, but there's also a lot of pleasure in the things that we do sort of throughout the day, the normal things that we do. And so this is about extending that pleasure. Caitlin, could you bring up the first point? Okay, so the first point for savoring is to notice nature. This can be, as I mentioned before, like it could be pictures that you look at online. It could be going outside if you're not able to go outside, just looking out the window, looking at the sky. And this is a deliberate experience of just paying attention to a leaf for 10 seconds and looking at the shape of the leaf. Or hearing the birds in the trees, or looking at the clouds move. So this is a sort of an immersive time in nature. Caitlin, next point. Another way to savor is to savor the first bite of a food that you eat, or the first sip of a drink. Often the first bite or sip is the most pleasurable anyway. And this is a way to connect with food. Like, food is obviously a source of pleasure for a lot of people, but it's also a necessity. And so sometimes it can be a chore. And so the savoring practice is a way to really connect with the pleasure in food. So for the first bite or sip, really taste the food or the drink, notice the texture and the temperature, and just really enjoy it. It can be grounding and a good reminder that this thing that we do every day to nourish ourselves can actually be really enjoyable. Next point. Focus on a song you love. So this is if there's a chorus that you really like, or a song where the singer's voice changes, the emotion changes, and you really just enjoy that part. Maybe close your eyes, because of course you can hear better with your eyes closed, and just really listen to it and enjoy it. It can be really grounding and just bring a smile to your face to have even a few seconds of really enjoying a song. Next point. Wash your hands attentively. So we're all washing our hands a ton, and it's a chore. And after, I don't know, the 300th time I washed my hands, I thought about the sensation of it, and that I'm washing my hands differently than I ever have before, because I'm following the CDC guidelines. And so I was just noticing what that felt like, and sort of the soap on my hands and my hands against each other, and really started to savor the sensation of it. And it made it less of a chore. It also, this may sound kind of hokey, but it also made it feel almost like an active surface. Obviously, I'm washing my hands to keep myself from getting sick, and to keep my family, to keep myself from getting sick, not safe, and to keep family safe. And I also wash my hands before I go to the grocery store, so I can keep other people safe. And somehow that made the act of washing my hands just a little less of a chore and more something pleasurable. The next point. Appreciate your bed. We all spend a lot of time in bed. All humans do, but especially people with migraine, we spend a lot of time in our bed. So spend a couple minutes, maybe when you first get into bed, just really savoring and appreciating this bed that supports you, this sort of piece of furniture that you spend so much time with. Feel the sensation of the mattress under you, the pillow under your head, maybe the coolness of the sheet or the weight of the blanket. Any of those things, or all of those things, just sort of appreciate this bed that serves you so well. And the next point. Ask yourself what's been good today. Life is really hard right now for most of us, and that can make finding the beauty difficult, but there's also so much beauty around us. And so this is about just finding one good thing in your day to enjoy. It's not like a formal gratitude practice. You don't need to write anything down. Just ask yourself, hey, what's been good today? And it could be small. It could be you ate a delicious piece of fruit, or you saw a funny meme on Facebook. It doesn't have to be big at all. It's really about just noticing those little pieces of beauty in your day. And if you can find more than one, if you want to make it a bigger practice, great, because I think all the beauty that we can find right now is every piece of beauty that we can find right now will help boost our spirits. So these are my suggestions for savoring, and we'll do another mentee. This time, the question is, what can you savor? And I love Renee's recommendation or suggestion of leftover banana cream pie for breakfast. That sounds awesome. I love this. Thank you all for sharing and for make an obvious point that I haven't thought to mention, which is sex. I think that's brilliant. And the sunset and food, softness, the sun on your skin, that's a wonderful one, or the breeze on your face. These are really excellent. Thank you all so much for sharing. Okay, Caitlin, can we go to there we go. So the third category of self-care, we have soothing, savoring, and stopping. And stopping is about stopping things that aren't working for you. We're all doing a ton of things right now that aren't working for us. Honestly, I was about to listen out, and the last time I tried this when I practiced, I cried, so I'm not going to. I'll suffice it to say that life is hard for a lot of us right now, and there are a lot of things that aren't working for us. So there are a lot of things that we have no control over, things that we can't stop. But there are also things that we can stop. And so this slide is about, or these self-care tips are about identifying things that you can stop, sort of controlling your mental space, I guess, and managing your own energy. So the first point, so my first suggestion is to limit your exposure to the news. I did this about a month ago, and it's been fantastic. I'm still getting news. I still know, and I have an idea of what's going on. I'm not completely clueless, but I'm not reading or watching or listening to any news. And it's been really calming. I had been reading a ton of news, hours a day, and I didn't know where my day was going because I was spending all this time reading. And it was helpful at first, and then I reached a point where I was just completely stressed whenever I read the news. And so I stepped back, and it's been so helpful for my mental health and my ability to deal with what's happening right now, and reduces my overall stress, which is of course helpful for migraine. And if you're somebody who really enjoys reading the news and really gets something out of it, I still recommend trying to limit your exposure, not necessarily taking a break for a few days, but even a few days, but reading for a limited amount of time a day, or only checking once a day, or just whatever number works for you, but limiting it. I think of it like a workout. Like you do a really hard workout and your muscles ache. You could keep doing that same workout every single day, but you don't give your body time to recover if you do that. And eventually you'll hurt yourself. And I think of reading the news as the same way. You need a break to mentally recover and sort of let your spirit recover from really the tragedy that's happening around us. So if you're able to limit your news time at all, I really recommend it. The next point, take a break before bed. So I started this during the 2016 election. I realized that my husband and I were talking about politics a lot. And when we talked about it in the hour before bed, I would be so keyed up, I couldn't go to sleep. And so we instituted this rule of no politics for an hour before bed. And what that did was that gave me sort of a buffer, that hour before bed, where I could start to calm down so that I didn't get into bed and then lie there for an hour before I could then fall asleep. And this can be, for me, this was politics. Now it's coronavirus. It can be any stressful topic. You can actually just say, no stressful topics for an hour before bed. I'm only going to read a fluffy novel or watch a funny sitcom or whatever works for you. But this is about letting yourself calm down a little bit before you're trying to sleep so you can maybe get better rest. The next point, cross something off your list. So this is the small thing that's nagging at you. Like you need to change a light bulb in a closet, or like last weekend, I finally cut some bushes that I needed to trim back for months. Well, okay, 2 months, but still, it was months. And this is about just getting rid of something that's nagging at you. You may not really even notice when that light bulb is changed or those shrubs are cut, but you don't have that to do hanging over you, just sort of nagging at you like you need to get to it. This can be a small thing like, I don't know, sorting mail or whatever it is that's just bugging you, try to cross something off your list. The next point. Set a time to ignore calls and texts. So I started doing this during the workday. I don't respond to anything on my phone before 5 p.m. most of the time. And this started because I was getting a ton of group texts during the day, and I didn't really need to know that a friend of a friend was selling chicken eggs. Actually, I kind of did. I would have liked to get some of those chicken eggs, but the point was that it took me out of what I needed to be paying attention to at that moment. And so this is about controlling your attention so you don't have the sort of switching cost of going from one completely different thing to another. This doesn't have to be an everyday thing that the 5 p.m. just works for me. It could be that you're having a bad day, and so you put your phone on do not disturb for, say, 3 hours, and then you get to the texts and calls that you need to return. And you can set your phone so emergencies can get through, but this is about managing your own attention and your own energy. Next point. Limit conversation topics and/or links. This is another way to control your own energy. So think about, like, say you have a brother. I don't have a brother, so this isn't passive aggressive. Say you have a brother and you're his primary person for support, and he wants to talk to you for an hour a day about coronavirus, and it stresses you out. And so when you see he calls, you think, oh, shoot, I really need to talk to Chris, or I really need to answer this. And then you get off the phone after that hour-long conversation and you feel completely drained. You need to manage your own energy right now if you can. You're sort of, in these conversations, you're giving yourself away. And by limiting the conversation topic or how long you talk, you're taking a little bit of that control back. So it's saying, hey, Chris, I love you. I really want to talk to you, but I can only handle 10 minutes on coronavirus. We can still talk about other things, but only 10 minutes on coronavirus. Or you can say, I can only talk a certain number of days a week, or I can only talk for 15 minutes a day, whatever sort of limit works for you. And I know that this can be a really hard thing to ask for. It was really hard for me probably the first 10 times I asked for this type of thing from somebody. But it gives me so much more reserve, so that, like, if I did have a brother named Chris, when I saw him on my caller ID, I wouldn't think, oh no, it's Chris. I would think, oh, okay, I have the 15 minutes I can give to Chris right now. And so in a way, you're doing it for yourself, but you're also, it ultimately makes you more available to other people because you're no longer seeing them as an energy drain. And I'll add that right now, I feel like people are really understanding an emotional, that we all have emotional limits and that we can only be available to other people so much. I feel like people are understanding that more than ever before. And so I found in the last month, a lot of people are receptive to this idea of needing to limit the conversation. So I know it can be hard, but if you can try it, I really recommend it. And then the next point. This idea of pausing stressful thoughts. So first off, just so you know, I'm only going to say stressful thoughts. I'm not going to give an example because I don't want to plant any stressful thoughts. So I'm going to sound a little redundant here. The idea here is not to say, oh my gosh, I'm feeling grief. I'm not going to feel grief, and like shoving down an emotion and trying to ignore it. That's not the idea here. It's more about noticing that you're on a mental loop of a stressful thought and that it keeps nagging at you. And just telling yourself, oh, I'm thinking stressful thought again. I'm going to pause it for 5 seconds, maybe do some breathing, maybe sing along to the chorus of a song and dance around your kitchen. Or try to extend that break a little bit longer and play a video game or whatever works for you. I recommend when you start really going for small bites of time, because this can be, out of everything I've talked about today, this can be the most difficult. But it's also really rewarding once you figure it out, or figure it out is a little strong. Really what I mean is, like, once you start practicing it and it becomes part of your life, it's really rewarding. And it's the kind of thing that builds. So if you try it and you think, wow, I really didn't do that very well, you're not going to do it. It's not going to feel successful probably for the first few times you do it, or maybe the first many times you do it. And you might think, oh, okay, I'm not going to think for 5 seconds, but I still thought that stressful thought like 3 times in those 5 seconds. That's okay. This is largely about noticing these stressful thoughts, and then learning over time, and then practicing and learning over time that they don't have to control your mind, that when a stressful thought comes up, you can choose whether to engage it or not. So that is my last suggestion for stopping, and we'll have one more Menti. And this one is, what's something you might be able to stop? And it looks like almost everybody has replied, so we'll just leave this up for a couple more seconds. These are really great. There's so much to learn from you guys here. Busyness, stress eating, ruminating. Oh my gosh, I'm a big ruminator. Negative self-talk is a huge one. On that, if you guys, I mentioned Kristen Neff earlier. She's done some, she has an audiobook or a book and a workbook, really great on self-compassion, and negative self-talk is a big part of that, so I highly recommend that. Limiting phone time and Facebook, yes, limiting Facebook or social media use can be really helpful. Thank you again so much for sharing. I really appreciate all of you being so open and honest and letting us learn from each other. And so now we're going to move on to what I'm calling real world self-care. So these are going to be brief interviews with some people who all have migraine about kind of what's going on with them and what they're doing for self-care. So we're going to start with Chloe. Chloe is 21. She lives in Albuquerque with her fiance and their dog. She's a college student who is normally goes to school on campus, but she's attending school online right now and isn't able to work because her store closed. So Chloe, what are you doing for self-care? Welcome, first of all. Thank you so much for being willing to share with us. What are you doing for self-care right now?
Well, I'm really prone to stress and anxiety, and that can be a huge trigger for me. So the main thing that I focus on is self-care that incorporates something called bilateral stimulation. It's a big word, but basically what it means is it is stimulating both sides of your brain to help your emotional thoughts turn into less emotional thoughts, takes the emotion out of the equation. So little things that you do is cross your hands and tap like this. But personally, I prefer to do it by walking. It's not always something that I can do, but I try and walk for 15 minutes every day alone or with my dog, really take in the fresh air, focus on the movement of my footsteps back and forth, and it can be very, very calming.
Wow, I had no idea that the steps could be bilateral stimulation.
Yeah, it is a great reinforcer for if you're undergoing therapy that does bilateral stimulation or anything like that. But if that's not something that you're able to do that day, if I'm having a painful day, for example, I'll just open a window and then tap my hands like this. So it's a similar way of doing it, but with a little bit less effort involved.
That's great.
The other main thing that I do is I try and take time for myself. At least a couple of times a week, I have a project that I want to do just for me. So if that's, a lot of us are baking right now. If that's baking or sewing or drawing, something that's just for me, that I can create something, even if I don't like the outcome very much. It makes you feel like you're participating in something that you voluntarily wanted to do.
How did you come upon that as a form of self-care? Was it just trial and error?
I'm a psychology student and I also have an anxiety disorder. So when you combine those two, you end up learning a lot about how to calm down. What I realized was when I was using all of my free time to just watch TV or be on my phone, I ended up feeling a lot of extra stress, sort of building on what I already had from my regular day. So I really find that doing something semi-productive, but more calming can be a nice in-between.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And do you have any resources on the bilateral stimulation that you could share maybe in the comments with people?
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
Unfortunately, we don't have time to talk anymore, but I really appreciate you sharing. Those were some great tips, and thank you so much for being so open with us.
Thank you.
So next, we're going to talk to Wendy. Wendy is 48, lives in Charlotte, North Carolina. She is working from home, which she normally does, so that's not new for her. But new is that her husband is also working from home, and her two sons, who are 14 and 12, are schooling from home. So Wendy, thank you. What are you doing for self-care in this stressful time?
Thanks, Kerrie. I've learned so much, by the way. I've really enjoyed this presentation so much, so I have a lot of new tips to try. I think a lot of my self-care is preventive in nature, and it's actually things that I've been doing for a while now, and have just tried to continue. So I can kind of run through my non-negotiables, if that sounds good.
That'd be great.
Okay, great. So this took me years to kind of get this right, and I'm not 100% there yet, but these are things that are working for me now. A lot of them may sound somewhat basic, but I think the key for me is just to be consistent. So if I do all these things as many days as I can, I tend to feel better, and it's just as simple as that. So for me, sleep is huge. I have to guard it. And, and that means, keeping regular hours and predictable schedules. Even now when I could sleep in, I don't. I still get up at the same time every day. I still have coffee at the same time every day, and I do my morning devotion, and that's kind of how I start my day off, and that same kind of routine on the same schedule, which our migraine brain loves, our headache brain loves. I definitely also move my body every day, even if I'm having an attack. If I just can walk outside and maybe just around the neighborhood a little bit, I'll try it, and on better days, I do mindful walking as well. It's kind of similar to what Chloe said, but I'm a big podcast. I love podcasts and listen to those all the time, but I make sure that on my walks, I always turn them off for a period of time and just am very mindful about my movements, about the location I'm in, the setting, and make sure I give myself that time. And then I always tell myself to get into yoga. I know it's so good and I just haven't gotten there. But what I do though instead is I stretch. So if I'm watching TV at night, I will get on the floor every single night and I just stretch, my neck, my body, just really simple stretching. But I find that it helps me with sleep and it helps me not wake up with that neck pain, which can sometimes trigger an attack as well. I try to be more in tune with my body, which I'm still working on, but if I can sense I'm in a prodrome phase, I definitely, slow down, when I get my water, I hydrate, I try to just kind of shut things down a little bit. I've incorporated tons more vegetables. And then lastly, I would just say my last thing is a social connection. So I've had a friend since college that also has chronic migraine. And it's just so helpful. Like not too long ago, I texted her and said, Julie, I just had my 12-year-old give me an injection of sumatriptan, and to have somebody that knows exactly what that means, it's just so helpful. And I think you have to kind of keep that social thing going. Especially now. And I find too, I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm just kind of living with a general sense of unease right now. It's just kind of always there. And, when I'm really feeling that too, calling somebody, you mentioned that as well, but calling somebody, especially, like one of my parents who are very isolated or somebody that might, just need that little call, like that actually makes me feel better to make that call. So those are some of the things. I think mental self-care too is really important. And a lot of that is about, I think, acceptance and letting go of guilt. So if I don't want to, do the 100th activity with my kids and husband, I give myself the grace of just saying, no, I'm not going to go on the bike ride. I'm going to stay home by myself for 1 hour, so I do that.
So are you finding your normal self-care routine more challenging right now? Or is it more of like a port in a storm?
I like the way you describe that, Kerrie. I would say it is kind of a port in the storm, and I definitely, it is harder. I mean, my house is loud. I mean, we know we love quiet, and we love dark, and it's really hard to control that right now. So I do make sure there are times that I, go into my room and I get my Kindle Paperwhite and I just read, and I walk my dog a lot. My poor dog, has just been walking his little legs off, but I get outside a lot too. So it is a little harder. I have to work a little harder to do it.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. This was really helpful, and helpful to hear about sort of the consistencies that you do and how the benefit builds. So thank you so much for sharing with us, Wendy.
Definitely. Yeah, thanks for having me.
And next we're going to talk to Diane. Diane is 64. She lives in Philadelphia. She is sheltering in place with her cat and her dog, and she has chronic migraine, so she told me that her life hasn't changed a whole lot with the stay-at-home restrictions. So I'll let her talk about what she's doing for self-care. So welcome, Diane. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Kerrie. I don't know how much more I could add. That was such a great talk, and the two other women who spoke, that was great suggestions. Yeah, I mean, it sort of feels like I can say to the rest of the world, welcome to my world, the stay-at-home order. Staying at home, sleeping a lot, watching a lot of TV. That's sort of what a lot of my days are like. But one day where I was really filled with anxiety, I said, on my should list, I should be doing yoga and I should be meditating. So I went to YouTube and I started a daily meditation and yoga practice since we've been at the stay-at-home order. So that's one thing I'm really grateful for. And the other thing is I'm a facilitator for the Miles for Migraine community support group. And I co-facilitate two groups, one on Sunday night and one on Tuesday night. And those two groups have been a total lifesaver for me. It's just such a gift and a blessing to walk through our journeys together, our migraine journeys, and to grow and support each other, and to grow together and support each other. And we were doing it live, our support groups, but we turned to virtual after the stay-at-home order, and it's been a true lifesaver for me.
I love this idea that self-care doesn't have to be individual. It doesn't have to be like withdrawing into yourself. It can actually be connecting with other people.
Yeah, absolutely. If I can make a plug for our Miles for Migraine support groups, if you get on the website, and we have a support group 6 nights out of the week. So,
And can anyone join?
Anyone can join. All you just have to, go to the Miles for Migraine website and join any night you would like. And the two that I'm involved in are just phenomenal, great groups and wonderful people, and so much love and support.
That's great. And I love, and I mentioned the social connection, but also this idea of giving to others and being of support to others, that's also self-care. Thank you so much for sharing. Unfortunately, we're really short on time, so we can't talk anymore, but I appreciate you sharing with us. Thank you, Diane. So I want to thank Chloe, Wendy, and Diane for speaking with us and sharing their experiences of self-care. But I had Caitlin bring up this resources slide. So on my blog, thedailyheadache.com/self-care, I put together a bunch of resources on self-care, some articles I'd written, that belly breathing video that I had mentioned, some guided relaxation, and I mentioned I wrote on here a shared self-care brainstorm. I would love for you guys to participate in this. So this is just my contact information. I'm Kerrie at thedailyheadache.com. I'm on Facebook and Twitter. You can find me on Facebook much more easily than on Twitter. Please ask me any questions. Send me your self-care tips, articles that you have, anything. I would love to hear from you.
Thank you, Kerrie. Everyone is echoing me and thanking you for a great talk.
Thank you all.